feeling the heat. The US is one of the key markets for Indian tea, accounting for a sizable chunk of India's exports. Just to put things into perspective for you, last year, India exported nearly 17 million kilograms of tea to the American market. This year, till May 2025, that figure stands at just 6.3 million kilograms. So what does this steep tariff mean for India's tea growers and exporters back home? To get a clearer picture from on ground, we are now joined by Arijit Raha, Secretary General of Indian Tea Association. Mr. Raha, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here on ET Now. And since India is a big exporter of tea to the US, with tea exports crossing 17 million kg last year, if you can tell us, how is this 50% tariff impacting domestic growers of tea, and what kind of outlook are you penciling in for the next few months?
See, the US is a very significant market for us. As you very correctly stated that we have exported 17 million last year, we have 14% market share. We are competing in the US with Argentina, Sri Lanka, Malawi. And these countries have a lower tariff. So therefore, definitely the 50% deposition will impede our competitiveness. The other factor that one needs to take into account is that the capacity of producers across the globe and in India to absorb this tariff shock is negligible. So much of it will have to be passed on to the consumer, which means the tea in the US will become more expensive. But having said that, I must mention that the teas that go to US from, at least from northern India, largely from Assam and Darjeeling, are specialty teas in a manner of speaking, which cannot be replicated. So there may be a possibility of customers still wanting the tea and be willing to pay a higher price for it.
Understood. So that was exactly my next question, Mr. Raha. Given that there is strong demand for Assam and Darjeeling tea in the US market, will consumers then be willing to absorb the higher prices that will rise on account of these additional tariffs?
Well, we have to see. This year, 2024, as you correctly stated, we have exported 17 million. This year up to May, we have already exported 6.26 million kgs to US at a higher price. The price this time, unit price is about $5, which is compared to about 4.6 last year. So therefore, it is very clear that there is a demand for Indian tea in the US.
Understood. So demand for Indian tea in the US continues to sustain at higher levels. But Mr. Raha, what alternative markets is the Indian tea industry now looking at to compensate for the fall in exports to the US? Will those markets fully be able to compensate for lower exports that we will probably make to the US?
See, just to give you a perspective, we produce about 1,300 million kgs of tea in India. We export about 250 million. Now, I'll give you a spread. See, we have exported about 103 million up to date this year. Now, our teas go to essentially 5 geographical blocks. About 17% of the tea goes to the CIS bloc, which is the Russia, Kazakhstan, UAE. Ukraine. That is what? 6 countries, that is Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and Turkey, make up for 49% of our exports. The other bloc, USA, Canada, Netherlands, UK, Ireland, Germany, Australia, these make up for about 14%. And another 7% goes to Sri Lanka and the other countries, China, etc., Afghanistan. So therefore, in this landscape, as you can understand, we are actually the US export, while it is extremely important, but about 27 countries make up for 88% of the exports. So we do not think that diversification would be difficult. But the point is, US as a market is growing and has a lot of potential. And it's a valuable market for us.
Understood. So the market is growing and there's a lot of potential. That's the word coming in. But Mr. Raha, if you can tell us, is the Indian tea industry seeking any kind of support from the Indian government because of this disruption and the blow that the tea industry is facing? And have there been any discussions with the government so far, and what has the conclusion been to that?
Well, you see, we have been representing to the government to look at our export competitiveness and look at certain policy interventions in terms of the ROTTEP rate, for instance. The ROTTEP rate applicable to tea is about 1.4%. Our embedded tax rate is about 5.9%. So we've been asking for a revision of that. There is a orthodox subsidy. Tea is, you have CTC and orthodox. Orthodox is a variety that is exported and there is an export demand. So it is necessary to incentivize the production of orthodox tea, and we have been asking for an orthodox subsidy, a robust subsidy, to encourage people to make more orthodox tea, because orthodox and green make up 60% of the export market of the world. So if you are not making enough orthodox, you cannot have a higher market share. So that is the second thing. And third, unlike our competitors, say Kenya and Sri Lanka, our production centers are quite distant from the shores, from the ports. In those countries, the ports are closer, so our inland transportation cost is high. So we've been asking for some assistance on that score, especially the ICD Amingao in Guwahati, which evacuates teas which come through Kolkata. If something can be done to mitigate the cost that we are incurring. So these are some of the issues that are on the anvil. And these are being discussed. So we are hopeful that these will merit consideration in the future.
Understood. So that's as far as discussions with the government are concerned. Mr. Raha, if you can tell us back home, how is the domestic demand environment looking like? How are prices trending in the domestic market? And is the domestic demand resilient despite the global turmoil that the industry is facing?
See, as far as prices are concerned, this year, we are finding that up from January to July, there has been a decline in the prices of tea in India, especially North India, where average prices are below almost 14 rupees between April to July. And if you really look at July and August, the slide in prices has been much more steeper in terms of the auction centers in northern India. It is anything between 32 rupees to 50 to 70 rupees in some states. So there is a problem as far as prices are concerned. We are finding those prices are sliding. And this is happening for various reasons, one of which is, of course, this year the production is almost 77 million kgs higher than last year. That is one. Imports of cheaper teas into India is increasing. The imports of teas into India this year has increased by about 57% vis-a-vis the last year, the same period last year, up to May. Cheaper teas are coming in from Kenya, cheaper teas are coming in from Nepal. So these are all impacting the domestic prices. As far as demand is concerned, coming to your specific question, see the consumption pattern in India, it is estimated to be growing at about 2.3%. Our consumption is about 840 grams per capita. That is the estimate. So that is growing with the growing population. But obviously, due to the production increasing substantially in the last one decade, there is an apparent oversupply in the system, which brings to the fore the need for more exports. Export is not just for revenue earning or foreign exchange, but export also has a connotation of stabilizing domestic prices.
Understood. So that's as far as domestic demand and pricing trends are concerned. Mr. Raha, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here on ET Now and helping us understand what kind of impact India's tea industry is facing on account of additional tariffs imposed by the US. Thanks so much for joining us. But shifting focus to our next segment, did you know? And we today put the spotlight on oil. Whiskey and oil, two things you wouldn't normally put in the same sentence, isn't it? But they actually share an interesting connection. Back in the 19th century, when commercial oil production first began,